Hello there, I'm Kaz, and it's this channel's 8th year anniversary.
Whenever I do one of these anniversary videos, I always have a hard time starting things off because I'm just taken aback by how long I've been doing this. Not always consistently, but making reviews nonetheless. In 2012, I was in high school, using the microphone from a loathsome little laptop to talk about underrated DS games and was too afraid to show my face. Since then, I've done a retrospective on one of my favorite series, not a great retrospective, but I digress. I started a 3-parter in video game preservation.
Third part's coming out soon, again, not the most consistent upload schedule.
And I spent an entire week talking about 7 games made by the studio known as Wayforward Technologies. Coincidentally, they just happened to be releasing their latest game, Vitamin Connection, on the same day as this Tumble channel's anniversary, so thanks to a review code generously provided by Wayforward, to celebrate this occasion, let's see what this prescription contains with Vitamin Connection. Okay, that's a fun little opening screen. Good on the developers for warning you not to just shove pills down your throat. Or your pets. Or really anybody. The game opens up with the family receiving a special package containing Mina Girl and Vita, but wait, the Vita? It's alive? And it got shipped to a 1950s nuclear family? Well, it's pronounced Vita like vitamin, so unfortunately, the Vita is just as lifeless as Konami's management. Rest in peace. Anyway, the two of them are tasked with doing what vitamins do. Boosting your immune system to viruses, fixing a TV for the big game, stopping a meteor from crashing into the earth, thereby preventing an apocalyptic end to humanity.
You know, standard stuff when you buy your Flintstone vitamins at Costco. It's right on the package.
It's a relatively quirky premise with an equally unconventional approach to design. Whether saving the world or combating a cold, the Vitamin crew confronts the threat in an on-rail shooter, blasting away viruses, rotating the ship around obstacles, and moving what few remain in their path with all while navigating the branching paths pertaining to each scenario. What's most unique about Vitamin Connection are its controls and how it's thoroughly built around the Switch's Joy-Cons. It utilizes just about everything that the controller has to offer, right down to the gyros. This isn't to say that the controls work well, which brings us to the main problem with the title, how untenable the controls can be.
Now, I do want to preface what I'm about to say by pointing out that Vitamin Connection's controls were built with co-op in mind. It's literally the first mode that greets you at the title screen. However, since I wasn't able to test it out for, Okay, here you go, Roxy. No, I'm first player. Look at me like... Okay, you can be first player. You can press the button? Reasons, I can't attest to how much better or worse it plays than it does in single player. What I can say is that the controls are incredibly frustrating when playing alone.
It all boils down to how all the commands have been mapped out. The shoulder buttons work fine enough for rotating your vessel due to your main method of moving via the left control stick, but using the claw by pressing the face buttons on the left Joy-Con and tilting the gyro around is awkward. As is the fact that said claw doesn't open up and close on its own. That's down to tapping the right control stick that shares responsibilities with being used to shoot the laser. In a pinch, pulling out the claw is tricky, and the gyro controls make it incredibly imprecise. Moreover, why is such an odd button combination being used for one of the main mechanics? Why couldn't one of the 4 face buttons be used to close the claw instead of the control stick? It could still be mapped to the same Joy-Con and thus preserve the co-op experience instead of having it in this currently awkward position. Or better yet, why not have it close automatically instead of manually? Heck, even using one of the shoulder buttons would have been preferable. Why are gyro controls used for something that requires accuracy to hit a certain enemy or move certain objects when the gyro controls are overall incredibly finicky? In fact, while I played most of the game using my Switch docked, when I tried to play it on handheld, it didn't seem to work at all. Meaning if you're looking to play the game on a Switch Lite, this is the kind of precision that you can look forward to. Just gently moving it to the left and right does nothing. Nope, that's way too much. The final and only boss captures the conflicting nature of these controls rather well. The only way to defeat them is to turn their negative thoughts into positive ones and literally throw them right in their face. Problem is, you have very little time to move out of the way of either the boss or its blast. Rotating the ship can only do so much to avoid either, and even less to send the sinister sentience good vibes via the claw, given its aforementioned temperamentality. the fact that the class will often end up off screen and thus be unable to be used, and how trying to grab them leaves you vulnerable to the former shooting at you, because, again, when using the claw, you cannot move your ship whatsoever. The game it reminds me most of is Sigma Star Saga, another Wayforward game whose design was a mishmash of genres and myriad of mechanics that, although admirable in its attempt to mesh them all together, failed to stick the landing. The one positive is that the controls are consistent in the minigames scattered throughout its 6 levels, meaning you don't have to learn a new set for each one. Speaking of which, some of these are fairly decent and serve as a nice breather from the main game, if only for them being more lively compared to the rather sterile level design. At best, they're inoffensive. At worst, they're structureless and drag on from one area to the next. It's an on-rail shooter where the rail is moving at the same speed as a roller coaster before a loop, minus the part where it leads to something exciting or at the very least interesting. Level 4's major gimmick is mirrors that can reflect your laser, yet in that same level, several sections are missing any enemies for one to reflect their rays onto, to make use of this new mechanic that the player has been introduced to. There's not even, say, a switch that can only be hit by using these mirrors in these rooms. It's all aesthetic, with no purpose to their inclusion within much of the level. With few rooms host them and a foe or two to fry, it's often better to simply take them out directly, rather than dealing with angling your laser to hit them. What's more, the branching paths within them don't really amount to much of anything. There's no power-ups to be found for your ship. The most you'll uncover is one of 5 stars hidden in each level. With the level design being so dull, there isn't much motivation to replay them or warrant collecting them all. Just get to the main points on each map and hightail your way out of there. Vitamin Connection is not a long game, clocking in at around 4 hours, yet it managed to overstay its welcome. By the halfway point, I found myself less intrigued by what unique challenges lied ahead, and more fast-forwarding sections of a particular level out of pure boredom, and the game responded to said disinterest with an equally lax approach to level design, with areas literally lacking an enemy or any form of obstacle. This should not have been as common as it was, and we're not talking about the part where the game forces you to go back through the same level upon completing the final minigame at the Waroh Land 4, namely since Waroh Land 4's backtracking made creative use of Warrior's abilities on your way back to the beginning. Also, there was this timer that created a sense of urgency, and if you didn't beat the level before then, you would have to do it all over again. This is backtracking of the worst kind, padding out an already short game with no rhyme or reason to it. There are no enemies, no challenges to be found throughout much of this backtracking, which is to say nothing of traversing the levels themselves. Oftentimes it's better to just hug the edge and hold down the fast forward button, tanking any hits to grab the rather generous amount of health recovery hidden in walls or laid out in the open. Vitamin Connection is a game that feels 3 years behind the times, the type of unfocused title you'd see at the start of a console's life cycle, one that throws everything in the wall to see what will stick as it experiments with the new console's hardware before making a more methodical use of its wares. Only it's 2020, and the Switch has already seen its fair share of software that makes far less gimmicky use of its controller with far greater success. At least the game looks pleasant enough. While the art style took some time to grow on me, the rendering of said art is full of charm and vigor that's become standard for Wayforward. It really brings out the character in all the people that the Vitamin crew interact with, as does the oft over-exaggerated voice acting. It's like they were plucked right out of an 80s Saturday morning cartoon. The same can't be said for the stages, which mostly has to do with how much of the foreground covers up the back, with the former obscuring some of the more refined details of the latter. Can you guess where this is supposed to be? It's the inside of a meteor in outer space. Apparently, you can barely make out what appears to be outer space when the rest of the screen is flooded with this bloodstream-like texture as opposed to a barren space rock.
While it's respectable that it's trying something different, ultimately none of its ideas ever come together, and there's only so much that its pleasant presentation can do to cover a meandering level design. Again, maybe it plays a lot better in co-op, but I wasn't able to test it out. In any case, Vitamin Connection earns a 5.5 out of 10.
As for what's in store for the channel this year, it's mostly going to be catch up with the Persona Western retrospective, and finally reviewing the entirety of Fire Emblem Three Houses. That doesn't mean we won't have some surprises in store, but I'll save those for the summer. Until next time, game on my friends.